afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. In the 1700s, a man named Joel Poinsett introduced the poinsettia plant to the United States from Mexico. Poinsett was a botanist, physician, and the first United States ambassador to Mexico. Well, 3 centuries later, the poinsettia is now the most popular holiday plant in the country. And today there are more than 100 varieties of poinsettias available. So for our first segment, we join UVM Extension horticulturalist Leonard Perry in the greenhouse to tell us about extending the life of your holiday poinsettia.
There's nothing that really puts me in the Christmas spirit more than visiting a local greenhouse and seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of poinsettias, as we see here at Clausen's greenhouses in Colchester before the holiday season. And there's just so many different types. There's some new types in addition to the traditional red ones that you might want to consider. This is probably one of the most different. This is a rose series. It's a red and a pink rose. It actually looks kind of like a rose, very different. This is one that I've liked. It came out several years ago called Monet. A new one, a punch series. There's a sparkling and a nice punch with a little bit of white in the leaves. Traditional white. You can get just a traditional pink. One such as this, which is again a kind of different one with speckles in it. This has a lot of speckles. This is called glitter. There's an older variety called Jingle Bells. It's really nice. And then there are the types with kind of white on the edges. That's called a marble type. And there's red and white marbles. And then for one that's, if you want a really maroon color, there's this new maroon color of poinsettia. So those are just some of the range of the different types. If you can't decide, how about a tricolor mix? Several put together, or even a couple of colors, as we see in the back with the punch series, the ice punch and the sparkling punch, the red and the pink with the white in it. We saw earlier in the small size. So again, if you have a small space or want to put them on small tables, the small sizes, but the big ones, even you can hang ones like this. I often get one of these. They're so full, take the hanger off and just set that on a table, and it just is beautiful there. So as far as choosing them, a couple of other things to keep in mind when you do go out and look for them. Keep in mind that these colored parts are actually modified leaves called bracts. The bits in the center, the little yellow parts, are the flowers. And that's what you want to look at, because when choosing one, you want those either not open or still very tight. If they're all the way open, that means the poinsettia is pretty old and going past, hasn't had the right care. If they're not even there, again, a good side that hasn't had the right care. So you want these little yellow buds in the center, which are the true flowers. Also, look at the foil for a couple of reasons. One is often it hides lack of leaves, or in this case, kind of one-sided. This didn't get enough light on this side. You want one that's balanced all the way around. So look for that. And also, the foil, attractive as it is, will hold water if it doesn't have a hole. Usually they don't. So when you get that home, either take the foil off, or what I do is make a small hole in the bottom, put it in a saucer to keep the water from draining onto furniture, and that way you can see how much water is there. You don't want the poinsettia sitting in water. That's one of the things it doesn't like. But first, to get it home, once you've chosen one, you want to protect it from cold. They really don't like cold that we have up here. Very sensitive. That can make the flowers turn bad. So make sure if they're small, in a paper bag or this sleeve, as it's called, for plants, make sure it's fastened at the top, either with tape or a staple. So a good store will do that. Insist on that, or else your plant may not live when it's coming home. Make sure the car is warm. All these things, remember, it doesn't have a coat on. That's all it's got to protect it from the cold. And then once home, you want to make sure, again, that it doesn't get overwatered. If in doubt, don't water. Keep it on the dry side and make sure it drains well. And keep the poinsettias away from windows or wood stoves. They really don't like warm or cold drafts on them. Other than that, they're pretty foolproof, will last a long time. And one of the things to keep in mind, too, that I often get questions about, even for my daughter this year, is the poinsettia poisonous to people or pets? And the answer is no. That's a myth. It's not poisonous to pets or people. Pets may sample a leaf, like our cats did this year, and with the milky sap in there, they'll find quickly that that doesn't taste very good and doesn't agree with their tummies. But these are not poisonous. And there's some other holiday plants you might consider, though, if you want something different or plants to last a long time. One is the cyclamen. These come in various sizes, from real small to real big. This is actually a miniature cyclamen. There are ones with bigger flowers. It's a regular cyclamen. Again, again, purples, whites, bicolors, reds like this. This is a good stage to buy a cyclamen. You want a few flowers open, a few buds, and look underneath because you want some other flowers coming along as well, some of those buds. The cyclamen likes it cool. Poinsettia likes it warm. This likes it cooler, maybe 55 to 65, and it likes even watering. This one, too wet or too dry, leaves may drop off and turn yellow. So even watering with a cyclamen, not sitting in water but not too dry either, will keep this for the longest time. Another one that you often see in stores all over is the calancho. This is actually a succulent, meaning it's very succulent leaves, very thick. It's kind of a dry, xeriscape type plant, so it really doesn't like to be overwatered. This comes in reds, oranges, yellows, purples, a lot of really bright colors. So again, a little bit on the dry side. This will last for weeks, probably, maybe 2 or 3 months even, with the flowers coming on those. So that's a great one to have, as is, if you want one, probably the longest lasting is the Christmas cactus. This is the one I've heard people say they got from their grandmother, they've had for 20 or 30 years. As it grows, gradually repotted every few years, maybe a clay pot, but this is in a hanger, but you can also put it in just a regular pot on the table, and this will bloom around Christmas. Purples, there's whites, there's reds on the Christmas cactus. So again, a cactus, so again, don't overwater this, keep it a bit on the dry side if anything, and hopefully you would get many years of bloom out of this. So, just to recap with a poinsettia, don't overwater, keep them away from drafts, away from windows, away from wood stoves, they don't like that either, and treat it as a house plant with as much light as you can give it after the holidays and fertilizer. For University of Vermont Extension, I'm Leonard Perry.
Thank you, Leonard. Our next segment looks at the work being done to protect ash trees in Vermont's urban areas. Across the state, communities are developing action plans to protect their ash trees from devastation. Rebecca Gollin tells us more from Montpelier.
What makes this tree really impressive is its size.
Montpelier Parks Director and tree warden Jeff Bayer spends a lot of time tracking the health of the trees in town.
Healthy trees communicates to others the vibrancy and health of the community.
Based on the large and hardy trees lining many of its streets, Montpelier is a very healthy community.
It's right in between the sidewalk and the road. There's very little soil. Salt, cars, sidewalk plows. For a tree to get to the size and scale is really unusual, unique, and an incredible amount of time to get to this size.
Because of harsh conditions, a lot of street trees only last about 5 to 7 years, according to Bayer. What makes Montpelier's downtown unique is the size and age of many of the trees. Bayer thinks this one is over 50 years old. But that's not the only reason he pays special attention to it.
Almost all of our significant downtown trees within the sidewalk areas, the ones that are huge and beautiful, most of them, a really high percentage, are ash trees.
Ash trees are popular in many Vermont towns because they're fast-growing and one of the few native species that is salt-tolerant, an important characteristic for any street tree in Vermont. Bayer estimates that ash makes up about 25% of Montpelier's downtown trees. But those trees are facing a deadly threat.
When that comes through, we'll go from this beautiful, graceful canopy to just about a blank slate. That's what we're facing, and I'm sure many other communities are facing with the ash tree.
What communities and ash trees are facing is a relentless predator that leaves destruction in its wake.
The emerald ash borer is an invasive insect from Asia. It was first introduced out in the Detroit area. And what happened in Michigan was it took them a while to really recognize what it was and to figure it out.
Though not large in size, the emerald ash borer, or EAB, can overwhelm in numbers. Often spread to new areas on firewood, the signs of an infestation can remain subtle until it's too late.
It's hard to find it initially when it first comes into an area. Oftentimes you don't see the damage for 2 or 3 years until after the insects really become established in a tree or a group of trees.
Paul Frederick is a forester with the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. He and other foresters around the state are planning for the arrival of the EAB. It has not yet been identified in Vermont, but has been seen in every surrounding state, as well as Quebec.
They found the insect as far as up north as Rensselaer County, which is pretty close to Bennington County in Vermont. So we're pretty well surrounded at this point. So these are all ash.
When the insect does arrive, Vermont needs to be ready.
Not all ash are killed. They've been able to determine that there are some ash that survive, but 98% of the ash essentially dies in those areas from the infestation eventually.
A hard wood with an appealing pattern, ash is used to make products from sporting gear and tools to fine furniture. At about 7% of the standing wood in the state, around 150 million trees, the economic impact of a near total die-off of ash could be enormous. Not to mention the cost to communities and homeowners who will have to remove or replace their ash trees.
As part of the preparedness plan, you really need to know how many ash trees you have, how vulnerable is your community.
John Aquilashik is a member of Montpelier's Tree Board, a volunteer group that helps maintain downtown trees as well as plan for the future. He took the lead on a preparedness plan for the city.
The question is not if, but when. And it's going to happen. So it's important for the community to be prepared for the emerald ash borer's arrival, because it will cause havoc with our ash trees. Across the country, there are billions of ash trees that are at stake here, and millions have been killed by the emerald ash borer. When I started working on the plan, 19 states were infested. Now it's up to 22. So the emerald ash borer is on the move. The larvae create a gallery right under the bark, as you can see here, and it's a serpentine kind of gallery where they're chewing away and getting larger.
As part of the preparedness plan, Aquilashik and others have been conducting an inventory of the ash trees in the area. With this information, they've been able to make recommendations to the City Council regarding the potential economic impact of the insect, as well as steps the community can start taking now to brace for that impact.
When the emerald ash borer arrives, it can spread quickly throughout the city. And the emerald ash borer will kill the tree becomes very brittle and becomes dangerous to both cars and people. So it's important that street trees be addressed promptly before they become this kind of brittle tree that can snap and fall on people or their property. And in the parks, we have the same situation where you have trails and all sorts of ash trees along the trail. So it is sort of a hazard potential with these dying ash trees.
Montpelier has established a tree nursery with a wide variety of species. For now, those trees are used to replace current downtown trees as they're needed. But the idea is to have a stock of trees ready to replace the town's ash trees when they die. Another way of raising awareness is the Look Up Vermont campaign, where bright purple ribbons and information on ash trees around town encourages community members to keep an eye out for signs of infestation, which often starts at the top of trees.
You'll start seeing some decline and dieback in the tops of the trees. One of the things that's been noticed recently around the Northeast is that you start seeing significant amounts of woodpecker activity in those trees, and they'll start to peel off pretty big portions of the bark, trying to get at the insects to feed on the larvae in the tops of the trees. So you'll start to see patches of bare bark showing up, and that's been a pretty good way of actually identifying the insect initially in areas.
The hope is that an infestation will be spotted early enough to slow the spread, and possibly even give communities the option of using pesticides or other measures to protect some of their most valuable ash trees until the threat passes. But these defenses are expensive and not always effective. For now, the best defense is a strong offense. In Montpelier, I'm Rebecca Gollin with Across the Fence.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for joining us. That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.